Hiya, welcome to Timeform's Breeders' Cup preview. I'm Matt Gardner, and I'm pleased to say that joining me is Timeform's international race analyst, Mark Milligan. Mark, welcome.
Hello, it's good to be here. Hopefully we're going to find a few winners and point people in the right direction along the way.
Yep, that's the idea. So before we get stuck into, I know you picked out a few bets for the meeting. I think it'd be quite good. I mean, one of the things I know that I take for granted these days, thinking about racing in the UK, is track sort of idiosyncrasies. You know, I know what it takes to win around Beverley, the ups and downs of Epsom, that sort of thing. But for people a bit less familiar with US racing, what are we looking for at Keeneland in terms of what it takes to win there, the surfaces, you know, that sort of thing?
Yeah, in terms of Keeneland itself, the track is pretty much what you would expect from a North American racetrack. You're talking a left-hand oval, just over a mile round, the turf track inside the dirt track. What is a little bit different at Keeneland compared to a lot of the US tracks, on the dirt, there's a run-in of, or a home straight of nearly 2 furlongs, and by American standards, that's quite a long home straight. You're normally dealing with home straights of a furlong and a half or so. So in terms of the home straight, there's quite a long home straight. Now, it's worth pointing out that they do have 2 winning posts at Keeneland on the dirt track. So
right.
the earlier winning post is in use for 3 races, which are the Dirt Mile and the 2 Juvenile dirt races on Friday. So that then, having just said how long the home straight is at Keeneland, actually shortens the home straight for those 3 races. But for all of the dirt races, they use the second winning post, and you've got a home straight of about 2 furlongs. The turf track is inside the dirt track, and as you would expect, it's quite a tight, about a 7.5 furlong round oval. So in races of a mile, for instance, they start quite close to the first turn, so the draw can be quite important. You don't really want to be marooned too wide over a mile on the turf track.
Right, okay, yeah. Thinking about the finishing line, if you're a Sandown jumps racing fan, you'll know exactly all about that, won't you?
Absolutely.
Right, so yeah, that covers the tracks. What about trainers, jockeys? Any less familiar to people that don't necessarily follow, you know, American racing all that closely? Are there any that we should be, you know, keeping an eye out for?
Yeah, I think obviously you've got your likes of Todd Pletcher and Bob Baffert, who always do well at this sort of meeting. Chad Brown in particular is a trainer to watch out for on the turf track in particular, but most people will be familiar with Chad Brown. Now, one trainer who's very much burst into the top echelon over the last few years or so is a trainer called Brad Cox. Now, he's quickly elevated himself into the top rank of American trainers, but he's a name that might not be too familiar with people in this country. And he's got a couple of good chances throughout the weekend, his main one probably being Monomoy Girl in the distaff. So Brad Cox would be one trainer I would advise people to focus quite closely on. In terms of jockeys, the Ortiz brothers tend to dominate out in America, but there's a very, very good young up-and-coming jockey by the name of Tyler Gaffleone, who I think people should keep on side as well.
Excellent. Yeah, definitely a couple of new names to me anyway. Right, so we'll jump into the races themselves. I know you've got 3 bets across the 2 cards. We'll start with the first one that you sent across, which is in the Juvenile Fillies.
Yeah, the Juvenile Fillies. Now, this is a fascinating race this year for me, because there are certainly 2 or 3 that are going to take a big chunk out of the market in here. You're looking at the likes of Princess No, trained by Bob Baffert, and Day Out of the Office in particular. Now, Princess Noor, she's likely to go off favourite and probably in the region of about 13 to 8, 7 to 4. She's unbeaten in 3 starts. She's done nothing wrong. The knock on her is, though, in those 3 starts, she's yet to run anywhere near a top class time figure. And that's something I would be looking for in a race of this stature. The one I've taken a bit of a shot with here, it should be about 6 or 7 to 1, is the Dale Romans trained Girl Daddy. She's unbeaten in 2 starts. She's locally trained, so she hasn't had to ship in like the majority of this field. And she won a grade 3 at Churchill Downs in quite convincing fashion last time, recording a Timeform rating that isn't too far off the best in here. So I think for me, the first decent bet on the card comes up Friday night, and that would be Girl Daddy in the Juvenile Fillies.
Sorry. good. So that's on the Friday. The other 2 bets are on the Saturday, I think, aren't they?
Yeah, on Saturday.
Moving on to the Saturday's card.
We're going to start with the turf sprint. Now, this looks like a wide open contest, and we've got glass slippers representing Europe in here. But for me, I just wonder if she might be taken off her feet a little bit here. She is a decent 5 furlong horse, and this is over 5.5 furlongs, but they will go lickety split in here. And also, you've got to factor in this is around 1 turn, and quite a sharp turn at that. Now, the horse I've selected is a horse called Big Runner. He's coming into this in the form of his life. He won a grade 2 at Santa Anita last time. He's got tons and tons of early speed. He's also got the inside drawing number 1. So he's going to, providing he breaks well, he's going to get the lead from that inside draw. There's a speed horse just to his outside, but that one is 30 to 1 on the morning line and probably won't hang around for too long. Other than that, there's probably not a lot in here to take him on for the lead. And I think Big Runner, who's currently trading around 16 to 1 with the UK bookies, he's going to prove very tough to catch from stall 1 in the turf sprint.
Yeah, just quickly going back to glass slippers, what are we expecting in terms of conditions? Maybe I've not seen any weather forecasts or anything like that, because I know a lot of really good forms come on a softer surface, hasn't it?
Yeah. Now, just looking at the track and the way it's been sort of updated throughout the week. Now, the trainers who were training on it earlier in the week said that the ground was on the soft side, but throughout the week the weather has been fine in Keeneland, and it's warming up all the time, unseasonably warm. I think it's going to be about 21, 22 degrees by tomorrow night. I was watching on TVG, who do their excellent breakfast at the Breeders' Cup show every morning, and they were with the clerk of the course, and he was going around with the turf tracks going stick, and he's expecting the turf to ride what the Americans would officially label firm by tomorrow night. Now, in the American terminology of firm and our terminology of firm are 2 completely different things. I think it will be just on the fast side of good. When you look at the races that have been run at the Keeneland Autumn meeting, which is just finished, they haven't had too many turf races, but having looked at our going allowances for the meeting that took place, I think it was over about 3 weeks, it's generally been around good or just the fast side of good every day. And that's what I would be expecting tomorrow.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that makes plenty of sense to me. So that's Big Runner in the turf sprint. We'll move from the turf sprint to the sprint for your final selection. And the preview that I've had an advance read of, this one sounds like a pretty strong fancy.
Yeah, Yaupon, he just looks like an absolute monster. And what I really like about Yaupon, and if people get a chance to go on video and have a look at his 4 races to date and just look at his head carriage, this horse, he really wants to win. He's got a really low bowed head carriage. He really stretches out, and he's a very, very tough horse to pass. He's a young horse. He's only 3 years old, but he's got a similar profile to Mitoli, who won this race for Steve Asmussen last year. I expect Yaupon to go to the lead in that typical free-going style of his. He'll be very, very difficult to peg back. Now, what makes Yaupon even more attractive is the fact that Vekoma was reported to have spiked a fever in the last couple of days. Vekoma is a high-class horse. He would have gone off favourite in here, and he's out of the race now. And the rest, to be honest, by Grade 1 standards, I think they're pretty much of a muchness. Yaupon has yet to race at this level, but everything he's done so far suggests he's going to be a comfortable fit there. He'd be my nap of the three. I'll be very, very disappointed if Yaupon gets beaten in the sprint.
Yep, that sounds good. I mean, the market I saw, he was around the 9-4 mark, possibly a little bit bigger.
Yeah, I think that would be about right. He was 7-2 before Vekoma came out, but of course, Vekoma was favourite. So Yaupon would be, I think 9-4 is fair. I could see him going off shorter than that in America, to be honest.
Okay. Yep, sounds good. Right, so they're your three. I'll have a quick spin through the three that I've picked out. Three European raiders, and I know you don't know what these are yet, Mark, so I can see the horror on your face as we go through them. So I'm going to start in the Filly and Mare turf with Terebellum. I think it's a bit strange, possibly, to say for a horse that's going to be turning 5 soon, but I think we might not have seen the best of her yet. She didn't race as a juvenile, lightly raced even last year. She's quickly developed into a pretty smart horse. Won a Group 2 last year, won the Dahlia Stakes earlier this year, second in the Queen Anne's Circus Maximus. And I think we haven't really seen the best of her on either start since. I don't think she really took to making the running in the Falmouth. She was off 3 months prior to the Sun Chariot. I thought she travelled quite well, but then looked like she needed the run. I think going back up to Amana Quarter, particularly like you mentioned earlier, this being a relative speed test, I think that's going to be right up her street. And I don't know if it's her win record, possibly just winning the 2 races, but I thought she was quite a big price. I think the likes of Russian Fall and Mare are obviously bang in there with a chance on the Timeform card, but I thought Terebellum at around the 8, 9, 10-1 mark, I thought she was far too big a price, really. In terms of my first bet for the meeting.
I think you're not going to be overly confident now, because I was on a podcast yesterday and I tipped Terebellum on the podcast yesterday. To be fair, you've made a much more cogent case for her than I did yesterday.
Excellent. Well, yeah, there's something in that then. My second bet is in the mile. And I'd be quite interested to get your thoughts on this, actually, because in terms of last year's winner, do you think there's possibly a case that she's maybe just her abilities maybe just waning a little bit? She was unbeaten last season coming into the race. I know she's being beaten twice this year. She won last time, but what would you sort of rate her chance of defending that title?
She'd certainly looked very flat in her first couple of starts this year. Her last win, she looked much more like she was coming back to something like her best. The big knock on Uni, as we would call her, Uni, as the Americans would call her, is the draw. She's drawn wide, and that's going to be a very tricky draw to overcome, I think, unless they go lickety split up front. So I think the two things combined, the fact she may not be quite as good as she was last year, and the fact that she's posted in the car park, make her one to take on.
Yeah, well, that's sort of the way I was going. And I mean, in terms of the European raiders that we've got, I mean, Kamiko and Siskin, for me, fit into a broadly similar bracket in that I'm not actually convinced that they're really that good. I think they're a little bit of style over substance, maybe, particularly in the case of Siskin. I think Kamiko, I mean, I know he's a 2000 Guineas winner, but you can pick holes in that form. The Joel Stakes that he won, he beat Regal Reality and Ben Battle coming back from a break. It's not anything that I'm particularly scared about. Then you're looking at One Master, who's obviously a really likable mare, but you know, again, she's not one to fear at this level. Safe Voyage, a 7-year-old that's been found out up at this grade before. So for me, I was pretty tempted to throw him in at a price. And he's a big price. And the more I've thought about it, the more I've sort of convinced myself he's a good bet, which is a bit worrying. But that's Lope Fernandez, who it seems like he's always had quite a big reputation at Coolmore. Probably hasn't delivered on that fully, but his form is pretty good. Second to Pinatubo in the Prix-Jean-Prat, third to Space Blues at Deauville in a Group 1 the time after. The drop back to sprinting, I don't think has really worked the last twice. He hasn't really coped with that. I think he's well worth another go back up at a mile, particularly at a mile that's going to favour some speed. He's got that inside draw. I suspect they'll probably drop him out and ride him for that sort of late burst. Taking that into account, I'd be quite tempted to play him sort of win and each way, to be honest, as well. And you know, I don't think he's got as much to find with the market principles as 25, 33 to 1 would suggest, to be honest.
Yeah, would there be an argument to say that in European terms, his ideal trip's probably 7 furlongs, and this really sharp mile in American terms will suit him down to the ground? Now, it seems a while ago now, but it's still fresh in the memory, that burst of speed he showed in the Irish 2000 Guineas before just flattening out a bit.
Yeah,
and anyone who saw that, you'd think, well, this kind of tight 2-turn mile would be ideal for him. Yeah,
so for me, that race that you mentioned just there, and what he did against Pinatubo in the Prix-Jean-Prat, they're the two efforts that I've sort of focused on with this, and particularly I think the French one, where it was over 7 furlongs. He came from off the pace, and he sort of ended up isolated from Pinatubo in the finish. But it was about the 2 furlongs to the 1 pole, the move that he made, passing pretty much the entire field. I think, you know, Frankie Dettori booked, I think he can definitely utilise that turn of foot. If they do drop him out, he's obviously going to need a bit of luck, whether they have to swing wide, whether they have to sort of try and pick his way through the field, I don't know. But with my doubts about a fair few in here, I think Lope Fernandez can run a massive race at a big price.
I wouldn't put anyone off it, and the crux is he's going to be a big price, isn't he?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
and in a race that does seem quite open, it's probably the kind of race you'd want to take a shot at. Can we just touch back on Kamiko for a second?
Yeah,
because I don't know what you thought, but in the Joel, I thought he just was tapped for toe. He looked like he was going to be one of the first beaten. And with that in mind, I'm not sure how that this particular configuration and this race is going to play to his strengths.
Yeah, I've got my doubts about him from that perspective. And to be honest, just from a form perspective, you think back to the Guineas and, you know, he looked a 10 furlong horse after that, didn't he? He didn't stay in the Derby. A bit unfortunate in the Sussex. He ran fine in the Jobmont, but yeah, his Joel Stakes, that was on, you know, it wouldn't be screaming, I want a very, very sharp mile test, would it? And you know, I know we've got that rated in the high 120s, but I definitely think you can pick holes in that. And yeah, there's quite big doubts about Kamiko for me, to be honest.
Yeah, I think I would, in these circumstances, I would definitely want to take him on.
Yeah. So we'll go Lope Fernandez there, and then my third and final bet on the car on the day is going to be in the turf. And again, it's a horse that I think is overpriced in Lord North. To be honest, if you told me immediately after he won the Prince of Wales is that for this it'd be a bigger price than Mogul and Tarnawa, then I wouldn't have believed you. to be perfectly honest. I was really impressed with him that day. He absolutely battered Adib, who, you know, I know probably wasn't 100% that day, but he's a pretty solid horse. he couldn't live with Gaiath in the Jobmont. He was one of a lot of John Gosden horses to flop on Champions Day. And interestingly, it's easy in hindsight, and I only really looked at it afterwards, but it wasn't just Champions Day where the John Gosden horses ran badly. They've been a fair way below par for sort of the fortnight prior to that day. He seems to have picked up a little bit again recently, but going back to his Prince of Wales's win, everything about this sort of test should suit Lord North, really, shouldn't it? The turn of foot that he showed that day, and that he showed a few times last season, I think is really incredible.
Yeah, it's going to be a speed test, definitely. It's definitely not a testing mile and a half. And I think what you kind of forget, because the season started late and Lord North ran just a couple of weeks ago, he's still lightly raced this season. He's only had the 4 runs, hasn't he? My only concern would be, is this race a bit of an afterthought, having gone to the Champion Stakes and then decided he's flopped there, we'll go out to America? That would be my only concern, really. But I had no really firm view in the race.
Yeah, I think it probably is, to be honest. I think, I suppose on the flip side, I kind of think if they hadn't run him in the Champions Stakes and he was coming here, it'd probably be about half the price that he is. Particularly, Magical, yeah, she's great, isn't she? But in terms of, again, the test this is going to represent, she's shown that she stays a mile and a half already. This is going to be a little bit different to what she often faces. Tarnois was pretty good in France last time, but I'm not quite sure that she's going to be good enough. I don't think she's the same caliber as Lord North anyway. So yeah, I take the point about it possibly being a bit of an afterthought, but I'm definitely prepared to give him another chance anyway.
I can see the argument. It's not a race I had a very firm view in, really, other than, my only firm view is that I don't think an American horse can win. I think I just think they're outclassed by the Europeans in here. United, Channel Maker, they are what they are. They're early 120s horses on Timeform ratings. They've got no aspirations to be any better than that, and they're facing horses in the likes of Magical, Mogul, Tanawa, Lord North, who are pushing mid-high 120s. And you kind of think if the Europeans turn up in reasonable form, that the best the Americans could hope with would be a small slice of the pie, really.
Yeah. Now, we've run through both of our bets across the 2 cards. I did just want to sort of pick your brain in terms of a couple of the other Juvenile races on the Friday. So looking towards the Juvenile Turf, which looks a really good race, the likes of Battleground, New Mandate, and Cadillac and the French horse Sealy Way. How do they stack up, against the rest and the potential US runners as well?
Yeah, now, if you take a look at this race dispassionately and from a purely ratings perspective, then the European juveniles sort of tower above the Americans in here. That's not to say that the Americans won't improve, though. The majority of them are very lightly raced. Now, the one who's likely to go off favourite is Mutasabek, trained by Todd Pletcher. Now, he had a couple of goes on dirt to start with. I think they thought ideally he was going to be a top class dirt horse. That didn't really pan out, so they switched back to turf last time. And as impressive as he was when he won last time, he only recorded a Timeform rating of 105. Now, looking at all the metrics we use, the standards, the time figures, everything, it's kind of hard to peg him at much higher than that. Whereas you're looking at the Europeans in here being in the sort of 110 to 116 region. So again, this looks like a good race for the European challengers.
Yeah, and then just another quick race on the Friday as well. A horse that will be familiar to UK punters, Campanelle. I I thought it was quite interesting, her stepping up in trip. What do you make of that? Because she looked, the way that she did it at Royal Ascot, it was a bit different to how a lot of Wesley Ward horses usually go about their business there, wasn't it?
Yeah, now, but in terms of pedigree, she's a lot different to the standard Wesley Ward horse that comes over to this country for Royal Ascot as well, because she was bought in Europe. She's got a European pedigree. There are mixed messages really as to whether she'll stay this trip from the pedigree. She's by Kodiak, but she's related to winners over a mile and a mile and a half a furlong. So if she's going to get it anywhere, she'll get it round Keeneland and those tight turns. She brings, I don't think there's any doubt that she brings the best form into the race. It's just whether she can translate that form to the longer distance and potentially quicker ground, because she looked very good on softer ground, didn't she, in France?
Yeah, she did, yeah. I think it'll be quite interesting to see how she stacks up against Mother Earth, who she's had quite a few chances, hasn't she? And I thought she ran a good race in the Fillies Mile she stayed the trip, but without really looking like she sort of wanted any further. I think a mile is going to be absolutely spot on for her. And, you know, if Campanelle doesn't stay, I thought she was sort of, would be one of the ones in prime position to sort of take advantage, at least from the European perspective anyway.
Yeah, I think the one thing we can be certain of in this race, I think it'll be run at a very, very strong tempo. Brad Cox has got one in here in Ant Pearl, who was impressive from the front last time. But Wesley Ward also chucks in Royal Approval, who won over 6 furlongs last time. People in this country will be familiar with her because she came over to Royal Ascot as well. She's a very fast filly, and I think she'll take Ant Pearl on up front. I think they'll go a pretty sound pace in here. One thing that was just pointed out to me by somebody on Twitter earlier today, actually, I hadn't realised, and I went back in and I checked the stats. It's been an awful long time since Aidan O'Brien trained a winner in America. You have to go back to July of 2018 when Athena won the Belmont Oaks, and he's had something in the region of 60 runners in America since then without a winner. Quite a few of them have been placed, and I wouldn't be reading too much into it. I just thought that was an interesting stat, that it's been a long time since Aidan O'Brien, well over 2 years since Aidan O'Brien's trained a winner in America.
I had no idea it was that long, to be honest. That is quite interesting, yeah. So it also, I mean, we have to touch on the Classic. It's not a race that I'm going to be able to offer much on, to be honest. It's very much over to you with this, but it looks a pretty good race this year.
Yeah, I think it is. I think in terms of quality, it stacks up as one of the best overall renewals that we've had in quite a few years. Now, obviously, we've had better individual horses in the Classic when you look at the likes of American Pharaoh, etc., Arrogate, horses like that. But in terms of overall quality, this stacks up really well. And we touched on Bob Baffert at the start of this piece, and he very definitely holds the key to this, because he fields Maximum Security, Authentic, and Improbable. Very little between all three of them on Timeform ratings. Improbable just comes out on top, but only by a pound or so from Authentic and Maximum Security. And of course, Tis the Law, who's been the best 3-year-old in America, he's in the mix as well. He's drawn down on the inside, which might be a bit tricky for him, because connections are on record as saying that this horse detests having dirt kicked in his face. Now, he's not an out-and-out leader, so from stall 2, he's going to struggle to get the kind of trip that his connections would want for him there, particularly with the 3 Baffert horses, of 2 of which certainly are going to go forward in Authentic and Maximum Security. The one, in terms of pace, who looks likely to benefit most, I think, is Improbable. He came from off a really, really wild pace last time when he won at Santa Anita. And this could set up really well for him. Now, the one knock on Improbable, and this was pointed out to me yesterday when I did the podcast, and I hadn't realised it at the time, but he's yet to win or show anything like his best form away from Santa Anita. And he can be a little bit highly strung. He's played up at the gates before, and it might be a case of people want to back Improbable. They should maybe leave it late, see how the horse is reacting down at the start before he goes in. But in terms of race flow and how the race sets up, Improbable looks like he might get the best trip.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of his Timeform racing, it's interesting what you mentioned in terms of the strength in depth. Just looking like an average renewal, it's high 120s, borderline 130, there or thereabouts. The top 4 or 5 would have pretty strong claims to win an average renewal, wouldn't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
But like you say, it's Improbable that's coming out best on the Timeform card anyway.
Yeah, and as I say, he's the one who's most, of all the ones who are towards the head of the market and towards the top of the ratings, he's the one who's the most versatile. He's won from the front, he's won from like a stalking position, but he also came from stone last at Santa Anita last time. So they can put this horse anywhere in the race, and you know that he'll turn up generally and run his race. Whereas the likes of Authentic in particular, he strikes me as a need to lead type. I think if Authentic doesn't get the lead, he's the kind of horse who can chuck in the towel a little bit. It would be remiss of us not to mention Maximum Security, who of course was outstanding when he won the Saudi Cup. Obviously, he left his trainer there, Jason Service, under a bit of a cloud with the drugs indictment, etc., etc. He's gone to Bob Baffert. For me, he's not looked quite as good under Baffert as he did for his previous trainer. He's not been far off that level, but he's just not quite had the spark, which I think is understandable. But by all accounts, he's been training very well this week. Onlookers have been very impressed by what they've seen of Maximum Security this week. So it would be no surprise were he to bounce back to his best as well. But I think in terms of this race, Bob Baffert definitely holds the key to it with the 3 outside runners. But perhaps should just mention Tom's d'Etat as well, who's looked better than ever at the age of 7. Now, he was up against Improbable in the summer at Saratoga, and he literally was down on his knees in the Whitney Stakes there and lost all chance at the start. He went off favourite that day. Let's not forget, Improbable's going to go off favourite today, on Saturday, sorry. Whereas Tom's d'Etat, he went off favourite in his last run against Improbable, and that was definitely a pass. For me, though, for all that he's looked better than ever at the age of 7, I'm struggling to see him beating the likes of an improving Improbable, Authentic, Maximum Security, 'Tis the Law. But he has been pointed for this. They've freshened him since. He'll be coming into it a fresh horse, unlike the majority of his competitors.
Yeah, no, I mean it's a cracking race, isn't it? There's lots to look forward to at the end of that Saturday card. So in terms of our bets for the day, for the 2 days, we'll just have another quick spin through them. So I was Terebellum in the Filly and Mare turf, Lope Fernandez in the mile, and Lord North in the turf. And Mark, you were Girl Daddy in the Juvenile Fillies,
Yeah.
Big Runner in the turf sprint, and then it sounded like your nap of the meeting really was Yapon in the sprint.
Yeah, certainly on Saturday, Yaupon is going to take a heck of a lot of beating. On Friday, we haven't touched on the Juvenile on Friday. I think it's worth just touching on that because Jackie's Warrior, who'll go favourite in the Juvenile, has looked an absolute machine in his 4 starts to date. He goes into this race having already achieved a rating good enough to win an average Kentucky Derby That's how good he is. As a 2-year-old, he's already hit that ceiling. He does have stamina to prove around 2 turns for the first time over an extra half a furlong, and his price is short enough now, but he's going to take lots and lots of beating on Friday in the Juvenile.
I'll be honest, I did go and watch a replay of his actually, and was blown away by him, to be honest.
He just looks an absolute monster.
Yeah, I think I saw it mentioned on Twitter and thought I better go and have a look at this. But yeah, really impressed. So lots to look forward to across the 2 days. I'm sure you've highlighted a few winners, Mark. They all sound good to me. Hopefully between us we've thrown up some interesting stuff, and yeah, good luck for the meeting.
Excellent.